Alright, what's up, Dragon Brood? Y'all love this with Bloom Burrow, so we're going to talk about cards you probably shouldn't craft because they underperformed in the streamer events, and what we've been able to see from the kind of early pre-releases over the weekend. But before we get into that, I want to tell you, I have this really sweet shirt that you should check out, because I'm wearing it today. We just got these sweet shirt designs put into the merch store, so there's a link down below. You should check it out, support your boy. This is a great throwback shirt for Magic players, but also just a really cool message that I want to have out there. So check that out if you have a chance. Right, I'm going to start out with one that's just controversy, I guess, if you will. But Layline of Resonance. Like, this one just doesn't cut it for me, right? I don't think I saw a single deck that performed consistently well with it. Among the pro players that I was able to talk to that are testing for the World Championships and stuff, like, they didn't really believe in this card. And between what I've seen and what they've said, like, I don't think this is a thing. Now, don't get me wrong. Yes, in best of one, there will be some number of decks playing this, and they will occasionally win on turn 2. But let's be honest, there's some ways they can kind of win or put you close to dead on turn 2 anyway, and they can already win on turn 3 a couple of different ways. So you're kind of in the same situation. That if you have an early removal or two, that's probably good enough and you win. If you don't, you probably lose. And I don't think this changes this or that situation by much, honestly. I've not seen much on this card, and we've just seen the price on it just drop and drop and drop in the pre-order season. It's already down to, I think, like $4 in some places. So yeah, I can't imagine that this card is really living up to the hype overall. I think, again, there will be some times it's going to do the cool Magic Christmas Land thing, and it's going to feel bad on the other side of the table. It'll probably even get me a few times. But I would hold off on this if you've been thinking about it. Spend your resources elsewhere till we can prove how real or not this card is. Because I'm thinking it's closer to not than is. Oh man, the Mind Skinner. This was a weird card because it seems full of value, right? The 3 blue mana, you get a 10-1. It can't be blocked. Like, you get to mill stuff. Like, it seems kind of insane. But honestly, the 1 toughness literally dies to everything that kills a creature. And on top of that, like, if you're really in... I'll say this. If you're really into mill decks, then sure. Go for it. But if you're not really into milling and that's not your core strategy, I wouldn't even really consider this card. I only saw it come up once and we never really felt under threat by it. And I saw a couple other creators play with it and they didn't perform particularly well with it. Now, again, you're not seeing all the best versions, and there may be a thing down the road where this card is actually the card you want for mill decks, and it's a sweet thing. But overall, I'm not sure this is what you're looking to play right now. It's another one that I think if you're just into that, go for it. But if you're trying to particularly build this to be the deck you're going to grind with all the time in your top tier deck, I would hold off on crafting it right now until there's a defined version of what that deck looks like for you. Because here in the early goings, this just wasn't it. It just wasn't. I don't know what to say. It seems crazy looking at the stats on this card and everything else. It seems like it should be. But it really just wasn't. And that's kind of all I can say about it. Come Back Wrong was a card that I think a lot of people thought worked differently than it did. Because I remember when I first read it, for 3 mana, I'm like, okay, I get to kill a thing and then I get it back for a turn. Like, that seems cool. But then you realize, oh, that thing doesn't even have haste. And the card's a sorcery. So unless it's an enter the battlefield trigger, which don't get me wrong, if you get to kill, like, I don't know, an Overlord, that's awesome. Right? The white one, you at least have 2 creatures left behind. Or the red one came into play, maybe you killed something. So that's kind of cool. But outside of that, it's kind of like, what are we killing that we're getting back? Like, I hope to get my opponents... I don't even know. Like, well, Tyrannix Rex at least has haste, so I can attack with that, but I have to have extra mana to even target it. So just trying to think what you could even hit with it. But there are some things, don't get me wrong, that have enter the battlefield triggers that are actually reasonable, but... When you compare this to all the other removal you can have at sorcery speed, we have stuff that are at instant speed. We have things that exile stuff. We have things that just can kill planeswalkers. We have stuff that helps us hit delirium by discarding cards. Like, we just have so many better options than spending 3 mana at sorcery speed to maybe get some upside off of a problematic card. Again, if it had haste or if it was instant or something, I think it would be better. I just think many times we saw our opponents with this card. It was just like they spent their turn wasting 3 mana, right? They killed the thing, but then really didn't get much out of it. So when you have this card, if you want to get the value out of it, you almost have to target a thing that has the enter the battlefield ability, or you're really not getting any value out of it. And sometimes that's not the best thing. Like if you want to kill a Shieldred, let's say, well, you're better off just killing Shieldred with any of the other million things we have that can just kill Shieldred, right? At a cheaper cost even. But in here, you're going to spend the 3 mana to just have a Shieldred until end of turn and then it dies. So it's not that exciting. And there's just too many situations where that's the case. Because you're not going to want to kill, I don't know, their Deep Cavern Bat instead of killing Shieldred, right? It's just not a thing that makes any sense. So in general, it's not an awful card, but it's definitely not as good as you want it to be. I think it has more upside in Commander, for sure, where there's just, you're limited on the number of options you can play, because, you know, you can only have one of your other better removal. So in this case, sure, and you're probably likely to hit more things that are valuable to have, you know, enter the battlefield. But for standard play, I don't think this is the option that you want. Oh, Dissection Tools. Like, this is a card that has so many things right, but they're just not good enough, right? 5 mana gets you a Manifest Dreaded 2/2 that automatically gets +2/+2 and Death Touch and Lifelink. And that seems like it should be enough, but it just wasn't. Like in different lists that were tested, that just didn't come up well. Obviously fantastic in limited play, but I think the only way this really works is probably in some kind of scenario where you want to sacrifice things for free, right? If you're looking for that, this is a great like not fourth, but 5th or 6th copy of your sack outlet, right? To just give you that free sacrifice thing so you can trigger all your other stuff. You don't really want this in the Manifest Dread decks because, as it turns out, there's a million other good things that Manifest Dread, right? You have one that puts counters on your stuff. You have another one that comes on an artifact, right? You have ones that turn things face up. You have like all these other things that are doing more than just making you the 2/2. Now, don't get me wrong, getting +2/+2 Death Touch and Lifelink, fantastic. But at that price, you have so many other cards that are still Manifest Dreading and getting you something else that costs 2, 3, or 4 mana. So it's hard to justify this in those lists. So I would say if you need it for some type of sacrifice outlet, it's great because it's just free and it's reusable type of card you're looking for those decks. For anything else, I think I would hold off on this right now. Yeah, so Layline Mutation. And by the way, I don't hate all the ley lines in the set, just 2 of them happen to make this list. The problem here is that I never saw this card do anything. I even went and tried to watch other stuff that creators had posted and whatever, and like literally every time I saw this card in play, it was just a bad card. Like, because here's kind of the problem, right? You need to get 5 different colors of mana anyway. Whether you're using I don't know, like, there's a bunch of ways. I guess you can play a bunch of mana creatures that make different colors. You can play artifacts that make different colors. But then you've spent all those resources to get every color, and you have this Layline that was a card. So now you're hoping that making those 5 different colors, which you probably have access to more mana anyway because you use something to cast some of those. So you probably actually have access to 7 or 8 mana anyway, to then get something like maybe an Atraxa into play, a Valgavoth if you're lucky. But the reality is you could probably cast those anyway, right? I think many times it was like, is this significantly better than like an Invasion of Zendikar or whatever, to go fetch 2 lands, right? And then just give you the colors of mana that you need. Like, not particularly, you know, and I think that was the issue here. I don't know, like, this feels like a commander card. I guess that's the best way to describe it. Like, nothing wrong with it, but I think it's more likely to have impact in commander decks where maybe you're already playing a bunch of stuff that's 5 color, or you're trying to trick some monsters into play and you have some cool ways to generate the mana. I just couldn't think of a scenario, and I like playing weird mana decks and stuff. I just couldn't think of a spot in standard where we're going to want to do this, or that we can't just produce the colors other ways, right? Not the emergence, but the green creature that like you can tap all your other creatures for colored mana, right? That's a thing. We just have other options to just make it too easy that I don't know if we need this. And believe me, I saw Valgavoth and all kinds of other stuff tricked into play a bunch of different ways. So with there being so many options to get those things into play, I just don't think this is even needed. I think that's kind of the problem here. Even if we could figure out how to use it, I don't even know if that's the most efficient way to do what we're trying to do. All right, I think I have a lot to say about this card. Like, On rate, it's fine. It's a 4 mana 3/4 with Ward 2. But the fact that you and your opponent each get to draw 2 cards, that's already kind of a letdown. And then when you get to Delirium, it's like, okay, I can reduce their hand size so they can't have extra cards. But like any Delirium deck you think about building, even in Jund colors, probably isn't even going to want to care about that, right? We're not trying to get the extra cards in the opponent's hand. We don't care if they have a hand size or not. Like, that's not what those decks are trying to do. It's almost weird that this has a Delirium element on it, other than the fact that it's a main character from Duskmourn. I don't know what decks want this. Like, don't be wrong, there's a few decks in Commander that might, like some Necrusar, something, whatever kind of build probably wants this. But in reality, I don't expect to see a lot of this card. Not even at the Commander tables. I mean, I've seen as low as like 250 for this card already, so a lot of people don't believe in it. I don't think that it's terrible, but it feels like the type of card that, even in Commander, I would feel you almost have to build around this and make it your commander to maximize the usage of it. Otherwise, I don't even think there's only a handful of decks maybe you'd even just throw this into the 99. And in Standard, we just have better, more consistent things we can do with 4 or 5 mana right now that are just more impactful, especially where we don't even have to give the opponent more options. I think that's a big deal too. So yeah, in general, I would just say for now, stay away from this card. If you really have to craft it, just craft the one so you can include it in the deck and try it out. But I definitely wouldn't go nuts with this one. Yeah, I think I'm just going to be bashing on the main characters in this set for a minute because Zamone, I looked at this card when they previewed it, and I genuinely was like, what are we even supposed to be doing with this card? Right? It's a 3 mana 1/1, so that's already not great. But if you get it on turn 3 and you've played your third land, okay, great. I get this, like, whatever, 4/4 creature, whatever it's supposed to be. Legendary 0/0 green-blue fractal creature token, and then you put that many counters on it. So it would be 3 lands because on like turn 3 or whatever. And then you could do it on 5 and you can do it on 7. But like, this card has to even survive for you to get to a point that, you have a 5/5 or a 7/7 or whatever. There's already a lot of ways to get rid of creatures, tokens, whatever. So you're doing a lot of work to ultimately, I can't see many scenarios where you're realistically going to have more than a 7/7. Like, don't be wrong, if you top deck this late in the game, okay, maybe you get an 11/11 or something. But generally, that's just not going to happen. Every time, again, this is a card that when we saw it played, it really didn't do much. At most, I saw it make a 3/3 twice and a 5/5 once, and they weren't even all that threatening at that point in the game. If this was even like a 1/3 or a 2/2 or a 2/3, then I think it would have a little more weight because then the card itself would be able to do something or be somewhat threatening. Maybe there's a world where you can just, I don't know, maybe we're playing it where we put all of our mana into play and then now we're playing Zamone and you're getting like a 17/17. But again, I think we have the same situation we had with the Layline, right? Even if you can do that, we already have stuff with Lumra and the Vine Lasher and whatever that we can just kill the opponent with the lands coming into play anyway. We don't have to do all these other silly things. So, does it have a purpose in a spot? Sure. But I'm probably not wasting any resources, whether that's cash or wild cards, to have this. It just doesn't feel worth it. Marina Vendrell was an interesting one for me. I saw it work one time, and then the other 2 times I saw it, it just looked really bad. It's a 5 mana 3/5. Don't get me wrong, it does reload your hand. Oftentimes you're going to be getting 3 or 4 cards in your hand, and that's great. But I would say if you're playing a 5-color room deck, then sure, go for it. All the enchantment decks I saw weren't 5 colors, so they definitely wouldn't want this. But I will also say that most of the room decks I saw were 2 or 3 colors. Red, blue, or red, white, blue. I didn't see any that really needed black and green. There was a few that were forcing it to be able to play this card, but it really wasn't necessary. So it got me wondering, like, how many people in Standard really need this card? Like, I'm not going to sit here and say the card is garbage. It's nothing like that. It's just that the decks that seem to want to take advantage of it, the ones that are letting you lock and unlock rooms, obviously, aren't even really set up to play all 5 colors. Is it possible? Absolutely. I think the cards exist that you could do it. I just don't know if the decks are any more efficient. So until a deck list or a consistent deck list comes around that's playing 5 colors and taking advantage of rooms, or even some 5 color enchantment deck, I would pump the brakes on crafting this one. I think you can wait at least a week or two, kind of see what develops in the metagame, and if a deck pops up, then if you still want to play it, go ahead and spend the resources. Because right now, I think you would be spending your resources to make the less efficient version of the decks that exist. You can play it, but I don't know if it would be as good as the decks that weren't playing it. Okay, so for these next two, I kind of want to preface this with something. That I think this card and this card can end up being playable in the metagame. I just wouldn't craft them right now until you figure out the best homes for them or the best ways for them to work. So just want to say that up front. I'm not sitting here saying these cards are terrible, unplayable, nothing like that. I think they will eventually have a place. I just don't know if that place is right now. But that being said, the Rollercoaster Ride is a pretty interesting card, right? It's 3 mana and X, and then X deals X damage to each of up to X target creatures. So if you spend 5 mana, you get to deal 2 damage to 2 creatures, is how this works. I like this card in stuff like big red decks playing planeswalkers and things. You know, there's probably some control variants that want to play this. And then whenever you have Delirium, you now can actually have all your stuff that deals damage deal double damage. I think that's fine, but again, we also have to be aware that decks are going to be playing a lot of stuff to get rid of enchantments. And this is likely to be one of the few enchantments in the decks that are actually playing it. So you almost have to consider, is it worth it to play this just for the removal aspect, right? To be able to take out 2 or 3 creatures for, let's call it 5 or 6 mana. If so, then you're still willing to play this and that's fine. But if not, if you're hoping to get that double damage situation, you almost have to do it like as a top deck situation on turn 7 or 8, where like you can play it and then still cast your couple of things that are going to deal damage. Otherwise, I don't expect this to sit around much. Because again, even in the big red decks that are playing like Koth and the Sweepers and whatever, like the only other enchantment is probably going to be Overlord of the Boiler Bilges, right? Like there's not going to be a lot there. So this is going to get all the enchantment hate your opponent has. And I think that's the type of thing holding it back right now. Now, could we find a way to play this? Yeah, probably. I mean, there's got to be a home or a way to use it. I just don't know if we have that right now. Could be different a month from now, 6 months from now, who knows. But for now, I would say if you were going to spend resources on it, I would pump the brakes a little bit. Probably not what you want to be spending stuff on here in the early goings of Duskmourn. And I feel like the same thing can be said about Hook Massacre too. I almost rewind that conversation I just gave you about the Rollercoaster Ride. But this one's a little bit different in the sense that it can have some extended upside, right? Especially if you draw this late, you kill off a couple creatures. Awesome. Then your opponent has to spend some life or you get their things. So there's a chance this has a little bit more immediate upside than the Rollercoaster Ride. But you also have to think about how much that cost you to do, right? You're going to spend 5 mana. Well, really, you can't even spend 5. You have to spend 4 just to have it into play, or spend 6 to be able to make each player sacrifice 1 thing. How many scenarios are there where the black decks or, well, it has to be black heavy decks, so maybe like Golgari based black are looking to play something like this, right? On turn 6, you want to spend 6 mana to make your opponent sacrifice 1 thing and lose 3 life, effectively? Like, that's not that exciting. Especially when for 5 mana, they can just wipe all the creatures off the board anyway and exile one of them, right? I think that's kind of what we're faced with. They're just better cards at doing what it's trying to do, at least from the removal aspect. However, I think, again, down the road, there could be a home for this where somebody figures out the best way to keep grinding your opponent's life total, maybe making them lose extra life or whatever, to where, all right, now I do want them just sacrificing creatures or when creatures dying so I can get them back and they can't really do anything about it. That deck probably will exist somewhere where you're okay just having this as a 4 mana enchantment. I don't know what that deck looks like right now. I only saw it a few times, and each time it either was low impact or the person never even really wanted to cast it. So, like, I don't know what that means, but it's another one that I would just hold off on for a little while to see if it finds a home here early and save your resources for some other things. And I will admit, there were a few other things that were kind of on the fringes on my list, but I think they were all, like, at least even if they weren't super overachieving, they at least had a home, and I didn't think it was worth arguing to have them on the list. But if they're cards you want to ask questions about, as always, you can hop into the Discord. We're having lots of conversations about Discord right now. About Duskmourn right now in the Discord. Link is in the description. Also, don't forget, check out the merch, support your boy. This is a really sweet shirt. I really like it. And don't forget to check out the other video where we're talking about cards you should craft that overperformed, and all the other stuff we have for Duskmourn. There's a lot of sweet stuff right now. But that's all I have you for now. We'll see you next time.